I'm very honored and excited to be doing this interview today with a former client of mine, Christopher George. Christopher is one of the most courageous and inspiring people that I know, and I want to share his journey as a person who stutters with the world. Chris is from Scarborough, Ontario. He moved to Montreal as a young adult in 2011. He worked for a few years until 2015 when he went back to school to study video game design and learned about level design, scripting, animation, and texturing. He currently works at Reflector Entertainment, where he holds the position of lead dev QA. In his spare time, Christopher enjoys playing the guitar and building computers. He lives in Montreal with his cat Boots, who we might get to see today. If I am really excited to be here with you today, and I've been wanting to do this for years. And I literally, if I could, I would scream your story from the rooftops. And I always want to share your story with my clients, and then I just feel like, oh, I can't do it justice in the short time that we have. And so I'm really happy that, and so, but I tell them about you, and then I've been telling them recently that I'm going to be doing an interview with you, and everybody's like, oh, I'm going to be watching that video or listening to that podcast. Like, they're very excited to hear what you have to say.
That's awesome. No pressure.
Not at all.
That's
no
great.
pressure. Just, you know what? It's just you telling, about yourself, right? And
it's just me.
it's just you.
That's it.
It's just you and what you've been through. And, everybody has a story. Everybody has a story.
Yep.
And you have, your story includes an extra challenge of being a person who stutters.
That's right. That's right. It's something that has always, it's always been a challenge, and it is always going to be. But we'll talk more about that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So let's start at the beginning and let's talk about your childhood experience as a person who stuttered. So when did you start stuttering?
I think I started stuttering as soon as I could talk. I'm not exactly sure because I was pretty young then. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I think ever since I could talk, I have had issues with speaking. I've never had a time where I was able to speak fluently.
Mm-hmm.
And then like it started happening. Like I think I always stuttered since I could talk.
When did you become more aware of your stuttering and when did it start to become an issue for you?
I think I started to become more aware of it when I was probably maybe 6 or 7. I was in school, and there were times in which I would have speech therapy at school instead of a class or something. I would be taken somewhere else, and I would just have like this like speech therapy session, and that was a clue for me that like I wasn't quite like the other kids. I had to go and do some other special class, and I think I understood it, in that I stutter, but I didn't really know, of course, the entire scope of how that affects me.
Right.
Oh,
And if you don't mind my asking, like it sounds like that early experience of speech therapy was a negative experience for you. Is that true? Like how did you feel about, because you said, you were different from the other people and right, you realized that you needed help with your speaking and you were
yeah.
taken out of class. So tell
Right.
me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So it's I I think like looking back on it, it wasn't like a terrible experience. It was just there was a thing that I had to do that other kids didn't seem to have
Okay.
to do.
Right.
So I look back on it, and like it was um, a decent time. We played like games in order to work on the sort of speech and the fluency of it, stuff like that. So like I had fun sort of because like I was playing like little games with the person.
Yeah.
So
Yes, we try. We try. When we work with kids, you gotta open up the games closet.
exactly, it really helps. Trust me, it really
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, so that's when you became aware of it. And then, when did it become an issue for you?
I keep an issue when I had to start doing things that other kids could do that I was really nervous about, really scared about.
Mm.
Um, One thing that sort of jumps out to me is doing a presentation in front of the whole class.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how this started, but the teacher I had at the time, she was very kind, and she recognized. I'm not sure like if I said something to her or if she saw that I wasn't okay, but like she helped me out, and she started me off with just herself,
Mm.
and then like with each uh, who uh, presentation, she would add a couple extra kids, and then like a couple more, and then a couple
Okay.
more, and eventually I was speaking in front of everybody,
Oh,
and
nice.
that did really help, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was really, I think, the first time where I saw that like, oh, this I I have trouble doing things that other people don't have trouble with.
Right. Right.
And that just sort of course, throughout life snowballs, and you see like more and more examples of things that are harder for yourself that others don't have to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's challenging.
I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah. And did it affect your social life? Was it difficult to make friends? Did you have friends? Were your classmates understanding? What did you experience any bullying?
Mm, for the most part, my social life has actually still pretty good. I had friends. I had a, f- a, f- a few friends actually, and some of them I still speak to.
Amazing.
like now, which is awesome.
Yeah. There's nothing
Uh,
like an old friend, eh?
Absolutely, it's a
Yeah.
very specific experience.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, my social life was still fine because I had like a few friends.
Yeah.
I was always a introvert for obvious, I guess, reasons. It's a lot easier to just not speak sometimes.
Right.
So I tended to not talk that much,
Mm-hmm.
but like it was okay. I don't think a lot of people um, had issues with me stuttering. I think a lot of people were just okay with it and were like supportive and pretty kind. I don't think anybody like picked on me uh, because of it, which is kind of like shocking.
Yeah. Yes. I love hearing that. I do love
Yeah.
hearing that. Yes. Gives us
Yeah.
faith in humanity. And then what about your family? Was your family supportive of your speech? Did they get it? Do you feel like they understood what you were going through?
Um, my family was like somewhat understanding of it. I know that my dad he used to stutter when he was a kid, and that's probably how I stutter because it
Mm-hmm.
was passed down.
Yeah.
But my brother, he also stutters a lot too. Um, so my mom, like she already knew about like speech therapy and stuff like that. Um,
Your brother is
and
older than you?
that's right. Yes, yes, he is older.
Okay.
So my mom was like, like supportive, but I don't know that there was a true like emotional understanding of how it affects me. I don't think anybody really understood that support need
Yeah,
that I had.
that's a really, I'd love to have us talk with you one day, a conversation just about that. I
Yeah.
don't know if, I mean, I must have mentioned this to you in therapy many years ago, and you must have come across it. I'm thinking the
Mm,
iceberg analogy. Are you familiar with the iceberg analogy of stuttering?
I think I've heard of it, but I don't remember it exactly.
Yeah, so basically, the iceberg, the part of the iceberg that we see, right, the tip of the iceberg is only 5% of the iceberg, right? The other 95% of the iceberg is hidden. It's under the
Right.
water. And so many years ago, a stuttering expert whose name escapes me right now came up with this iceberg analogy of stuttering. And basically, the repetitions and the blocks and the prolongations and, the actual act of stuttering that we see and hear is only the tip of the iceberg. That's just 5% of it. And that's obvious to you, right? You're like, yeah, yeah. And every
Yeah.
client of mine says, yeah, of course. And I know that, but most
Mhm.
people don't know that. Even people who are very close to the person who stutters.
Right.
And I think it's probably a relief for people who stutter to hear that because often because they must be experiencing. So what's under the iceberg, right? What's under the water is
Right.
all of those negative emotions and negative messages and the fear of stuttering and the shame of stuttering and the guilt and you know like those negative messages that a stutterer gives themselves, like if I stutter they'll think I'm dumb, if I stutter I'm going to be so embarrassed, if I stutter they'll think I'm incompetent. And all of those things, right? I mean, this is a discussion for another time. But yeah, and just the fact, just to give a little bit of credit to your mom, in defense of moms and dads and people out there, it's not well known, and that's part of
Yes.
why I'm doing this, and I'm, I'll just give myself a little shout out here. I'm also an introvert, and even though I spend my life and my career is, talking, I like to do it privately, like one on one. And, I'm also an introvert. And so, this is sort of a challenge for me. And this is me going out of my comfort zone. But I really want people, of course, I'm doing it to support people who stutter. But I also hope that people who don't stutter, will listen to this and will gain a greater understanding of what people who stutter go through. It's not just the this. It's
Exactly.
so it's what's going on in here that nobody sees and nobody knows about.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. There's a lot of other uh, specifics that people just don't see.
Yeah,
There's a lot that I have to do in order to like psych myself up almost in order to speak to somebody,
yeah.
and people don't see that.
No, and it's, sometimes I will show, like especially lately, I've been, I'm always watching videos about, stuttering and
Yeah.
stuttering experts, people who stutter, interviews, and so recently, my husband, was listening to one of them with me, and my daughter was watching one. And so it's interesting to me when I see their reactions as well, because then it gives me insight into what people understand and don't understand about the experience of stuttering. And so, like, my daughter will say, like, oh, she hardly stuttered. Or my husband will be like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Like, what's the big deal? But that's, sort of what's underlying that. Read it between the lines. Like, it's not such a big deal, right? And of course, I'm analyzing it on a completely different level, right? I just
Yeah,
like,
totally.
and I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I mean, I even see the stutters that are not there, right? Like, I see,
Hmm.
all of the strategies being used and the pausing and etc. And, there's something called covert stuttering, right? So there are people who can basically completely or almost completely hide their stuttering by avoiding words and not speaking at certain times,
Yep.
pausing. They have all sorts of tricks, right, which I try to like stop dead in
Yeah.
its tracks when I get a hold of these people. I'm like, no, you must not avoid the words. But they're still stuttering, right? So if my family or anybody was watching this person speak, they would think, well, they don't stutter. What are you talking about?
Right.
But the tip of the iceberg is invisible for them, but like the other invisible parts of stuttering are still happening for them, and
Yeah.
they're still dealing with it, and they're still experiencing very strong negative emotions, and they're spending so much energy avoiding words at like trying not to stutter and thinking
Yeah.
about what will happen if they stutter. And yeah, so it's huge. And how could anybody know that if they don't study stuttering or if they don't experience it themselves?
Exactly.
We need
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
tell them.
Yeah, because like you said, like all that stuff is like other people can't see that, and we hide that, and I still, sorry, I still do hide it.
Yeah,
Uh,
of
I
course.
I do that stuff because sometimes, you know, some days are just hard,
Yeah,
and sometimes it is easier to just not speak,
yeah,
or to just like avoid specific words.
yeah,
The emotional drain is just too much sometimes,
yeah.
and that does happen, and for me it still happens, and
Yeah.
it's like
And it's okay.
it's it's okay.
That's part of the journey, right?
That is unfortunately a part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to make that clear to my clients. I tell them there's no 100% money back guarantee over here. I can guarantee you that everything that I teach you is not going to work 100% of the time.
There you go.
But, I tell them knowledge is power, because often people come to me and, like, you're fortunate that you had some speech therapy as a child, probably not enough, and
I did have like a few like people that I saw actually.
okay,
It
yeah,
was somewhat extensive, but still like
okay, good.
didn't always stick.
Yeah, but often I have adults who come to me who have never had speech therapy, who have
That's hard.
never had anyone explain to them what's happening to them. So I tell them, just the fact that now what's happening, that that it's neurological and it's physiological and it's not your fault. And it's not, people say, oh, it's just because I'm lazy, and it's, and they say all these things, and I'm like, it's just all in my head. And I'm like, no,
Right.
no, 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 no. Like, this is something you were born with. And I explain it to them. And just the fact, like we were saying, no 100% money back guarantee, and no guarantee that these things are going to work all the time. But when these people come to me, they have no strategies, and so
That's
they're
so
just,
hard.
yeah, they don't know what to expect. They know that, like, as we know, stuttering is unpredictable. One thing that we
Yeah.
can guarantee is that it's unpredictable, which is not very reassuring.
Yeah, it's not a great thing, but that's how it is.
That's how it is, and knowing that, I think, is reassuring.
It really helps.
Yeah, because they're like, I don't know. One day I stutter, one day I don't stutter. So do I stutter? Do I not stutter? How come? And then they start blaming themselves for why sometimes they stutter, but then trying to figure out, well, how come sometimes I don't? And, so I explain it to them, and I give them tools, and I tell them, even though the tools aren't always going to work, and even though it's not realistic that you're going to be using these tools 100% of the time, the goal is not to stop stuttering. The goal is to
Yeah.
be able to live with the stuttering and to live a full life and
Exactly.
not lose out on important opportunities, and to be able to be yourself and to have a voice even though you stutter. I think that's the key, is knowing that it's okay to stutter, knowing that sometimes you'll be able to use tools and you'll stutter less. Sometimes you'll just stutter less because it's that part of the roller coaster where the stuttering
Yep.
went down.
Yeah,
And
totally.
and sometimes you just have a really hard day or a hard period where the emotional toll is too great, for you to use all the tools and not avoid the stuttering and speak up and say what you want, and that's okay too. It's okay to
Absolutely.
have bad days.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally is, because you can't really stop that. It's going to happen regardless. And sometimes it's okay to just have a bad day. Like,
Yeah.
it sucks. It really sucks.
Yeah.
But that's what
Sometimes you
happens.
have to let
It's
go.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, it took me a long time to come to terms with that fact. It
Yeah.
really just happened in the past, like, couple years. And, like, it's
Yeah.
it's just something that is always going to happen. You can try to help it, and it does help, but sometimes you will stutter and you will feel really bad about it, and you just kind of have to keep going. And
Yeah.
that's not easy, and that's why it took me so long to realize that and to come to terms with that. But if you don't, then that's okay too. But, like, you're being held back by something, and
Yeah.
some days that's okay, but it's a choice of, like, who do you want to be? Do you want to to be somebody who gets held back from that stuff, or do you not? And I chose not. I want to keep going. I want to at least try to live a life that I'm happy with. And it's, it's still not quite what I would want. I would love if I could wake up tomorrow and I didn't stutter. My whole life would change probably.
Right.
But that's not how it is. And so I'm choosing to do something that is hard, even if it is hard, because it's still better than not trying at all for
Right.
me.
Right. And being stuck in a place where
And
you
being
don't
stuck.
want to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very profound. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a wow moment a few years back. It was actually in 2016.
Right,
And I
yeah.
went on and I saw, I don't want to give it away, but, that I should congratulate
Really?
Christopher George on his blah, 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 blah. And I was like, my jaw dropped and I fell off my chair. And like, I was in awe and in shock, and
That's great.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that said, tell me about your move to Montreal and specifically the type of work that you did in those years before 2015, before
Right.
going back to school, and then, how you ended up going back to school and working in your dream job.
Indeed, yeah. So it's a bit of a long journey, but before this, I was a dish washer for almost a decade, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Long time.
I didn't
From
remember that.
2007, that was when I got my first job as one of those, until 2016, when I graduated, and 2 weeks before the graduation happened, the place that I was at shut down, and I lost my job. And
Really?
yes, that happened.
That I did not know.
Yeah, that was a whole thing in itself, because I was like still pretty busy with school, like full time essentially. Didn't think I really had time to look for a new job. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to like apply to video game studios and just say that I have graduated, even though I technically haven't yet.
Fake it till you make it, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Close enough.
I've
It's like a
totally
little
graduated.
white lie. Never hurt anyone.
Close enough. I'm almost there. It's basically the same thing.
I think you were probably qualified for those jobs before you even started going to school. I always held you in very high esteem, and
Thank you.
absolutely. I'm
Thank
sure you
you.
were more than ready.
I was sort of ready, yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I started as a washer of dishes at restaurants. A friend of mine's, his mom, she ran a small restaurant in Market, which is where I grew up for the most part. And
In Ontario?
Yes, exactly. And So I got a job there, worked there for 5 years or just about.
And just if you don't
Um,
mind me interrupting you, how old
sure.
were you when you started that first job?
My first job was probably, oh, let me think. I was maybe 19,
Okay.
probably. I know that some people start jobs like super early compared to that. But I didn't. High school for me was tough, and I didn't pass it. I dropped out. Basically, could not deal with it, and I stayed
Mm-hmm.
home for a few years, just like depressed,
Yeah.
not knowing how to handle things, and my parents not really knowing how to handle things.
Yeah. It,
But eventually, I got out of that in some way. I think that still stays with me. That
mm,
kind of a change really, like, it affects a person for their whole life. And I feel like I still sometimes have that in me.
yeah. That must have been a
But
really tough period in your life.
it was hard. It
Yeah.
was really, really hard. It was like I was probably like 14 or 15 at that time, and that's the time when everything's changing and you don't know how to handle things, and
Yeah.
nobody really taught me. Like my parents did what they could,
Yeah.
but there wasn't this idea of like we need to talk about your emotions and how to handle it. Like
Yeah.
that didn't really happen.
Right.
So I didn't know how to handle it. So I sat around all day
You
for
checked out.
years. I checked out, completely checked out for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And I was able to get myself out of it. Um, but yeah, that's when I got my first job at 19,
Okay.
and that was when I really started to learn how to be social and how to talk to people,
Mm.
because before that I didn't really like know that or understand that, because I didn't really do that much,
Okay. Right.
because I didn't want to. I stuttered.
Talking was hard.
Talking
Really
was hard.
hard.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it. Like, I
Yeah.
still had friends, but like I would speak to them, and I wouldn't really start conversations with people. That's not really
Mm-hmm.
who I was,
Talking
for
with
obvious reasons.
strangers or talking with new people is always a
Oh, it's
big thing.
frightening. It's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah.
I never want to do that.
Scary. Risky business.
Even now, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But especially then, when I was going through all this, it's like I'm not gonna put myself through that. There's no way. So when I got the job, I was able to start to pick up on social cues and start to learn how to talk to people, and like how I do this and what's okay and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that really, really was an interesting experience, because I feel like I should have learned that a long time ago, but I didn't, you know? But here I am trying to figure it out for the first time. And it was good, the people there were like pretty supportive, pretty understanding, pretty chill overall.
I think
really
we call that
nice.
the university of life, right? Sometimes,
Exactly.
that's how we learn things, just by experiencing it and making mistakes and taking risks and
Yeah.
observing other people.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the dishwashing thing there for a few years, probably almost 5 years. And then my friends wanted to move to Montreal for like school.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I don't have anything going on here. I'm not going to go to school, but I don't have anything going on here, so I will come with you. And so it was like the four of us, and we lived in the same building, different apartments,
Okay.
but the same like building. So we could hang out kind of at any time, and that was really, really fun. And then there was another event, let's say, that happened, a sort of traumatic experience, like between us, that happened, and that kind of split the whole thing apart.
Oh, yikes.
I still speak to them now,
Okay.
like to this day. Like everything was pretty much cleared up, but at the time it was a big boom, and these were the people that I was here with, and now we're sort of, separated.
Right.
Not together. There's no kinship anymore.
Yeah. So you were alone, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And that was 2012. And then I went back home to Ontario just for like the holidays that year, and I was like, Mom, I think I need psychological therapy, because I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. And like at this point, I had gotten another job as a dishwasher in another restaurant at Montreal, and that's the place that I would stay at for like another 5 years ish, until it shut down.
Your employers must have loved you. You really had staying power. You were so reliable.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I stayed at places for a really long time, and I still do, which I get. I guess that's a good sign.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, in 2012 I had that job, and I was sort of not happy with it. I was thinking about like, okay, can I get a video game sort of job? Like, what can I do? What can I look into? Because Montreal, for those who don't know, it's a big hub for video games. There's a ton of studios here, and so there's a lot of opportunities here for that.
Right.
And so I thought, well, I'm here now, so let's see what options there are. Didn't really find a whole lot, because a lot of them was like, well, I have to go back to school, and I have to learn more things specifically, and I have to finish my high school and blah blah blah, and all that stuff.
That's a lot. To deal with.
It's a lot, and it's a lot of I have to call people on the phone and talk, and I'm never going to do that. So therefore, I'm just not going to do this.
And you know what? I just want to interject for a moment.
Yeah.
So tell me, why did you choose to remain a dishwasher? What was attractive to you about that job? Because I know for a fact that is not an easy job, and it is not the most prestigious job in the restaurant industry, let's say.
Totally. Yeah, totally. It's a job that sort of anybody can do, and yet not a lot of people are able to do it good. It's a very hard working job. You are running around a lot. You have to go fast. You have to go very fast sometimes. And it's not always easy. But for me, I was able to do that because I was alone a lot of the time, and I didn't have to speak that much.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's a good job for me, for someone who stutters, because I don't have to speak that much. Right. Sometimes I do, but not always.
So it was actually I was going to say it was a comfortable job for you, but I really want to say it was physically uncomfortable, I would imagine, because right, you're wet and you're sweaty and you're huffing and you're
Yeah,
puffing, and there is a lot of pressure because like if they don't have clean dishes, then where are they going to put the food? So they
exactly.
need you to do your job,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I guess it was more comfortable emotionally, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the part that was, that's what I needed the most.
Yeah,
I could do a physically demanding job, no problem. That's okay. But if it was emotionally demanding, or if I had to speak a lot, that's that's too much
yeah,
for me.
yeah,
So that. I think that's part of why I stayed there. And
yeah,
also, if I had to look for a new job, that means I have to contact people that I've never talked to before. That means calling people. That means exposing my stutter to
yeah,
people who may or may not understand it and usually don't.
yeah,
And then I have to sort of explain it all over again every time. And it's like, well, I'll just stick with this job then.
yeah,
Even
yeah.
if it's not like an amazing job, it's easier than having to go through that whole process.
It's the devil that right?
It's the devil that I know. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you mentioned that you went back home, I believe, in 2012, and you told your mom that, you really needed psychological help.
Yeah.
So what happened after that?
So I went back home. I said, Mom, I need some assistance with this because I don't have money to pay for it completely.
Yeah.
And she said, okay. She was supportive about that. Um, and so I was like, okay, I'll start looking after the new year or something. Like I'll take it like at my own pace. Um, and then I came home that year from Christmas, and I had a cat at that time, a, a different cat,
Mm-hmm.
and her name was Shadow, and she was very sick when I got home. She was not moving that well.
Oh,
She was hiding, and she I think she was dehydrated a bit because she had like a kidney issue, and
mm,
apparently I thought I wasn't aware, but they have to stay hydrated. That was easy when I was home, but like asking people to come over and like wash her. Some people are like late, some people don't always make it and stuff, and so I came home. I was like, okay, I'm going to like start to look at counseling like when I can, and then the day after I got home, my cat, she passed away,
oh wow. So
and so
sorry.
I didn't have my cat. I didn't have friends essentially because there was this whole thing, and I felt so alone.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I need to start looking now. I can't I can't wait. I have to do this because I need help and I can't do this.
Yeah.
So I did.
Sometimes I
And I
think sometimes stuttering or not, I think sometimes people have to sort of hit not necessarily rock bottom, but like a low point in order to admit, and to
Mhm.
that they need help, and because it's not nobody wants to be need psychological help, nobody, and it's hard, it's hard work, it's hard to
Sure.
open up to somebody like that, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I guess, you had to, all of that had to happen in order for you to be able to go and do what you had to do.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Like I was like done at that point. I was completely like I didn't care about anything. I didn't want anything. I I was emotional all the time, even at work,
Yeah.
I would just like start crying because I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
And
The
so
emotions
yeah,
were just too, what happens is that, right, when we keep like pushing our emotions down,
yeah,
eventually they come up to the surface and we just erupt like a volcano. And I think
exactly.
that's what was happening. It was just all the
That's exactly
emotions
what
were
happened.
coming out. And it wasn't
Yeah,
anything specific, or it wasn't that you were having a bad day at work. It was just that they had to come
there was
out because,
so much that was happening that I
yeah,
couldn't hold it in, and
yeah,
I needed help to understand it all
yeah,
because I didn't understand it all.
yeah,
So a way that I phrase it is that like I was broken down so much that like I could start to rebuild myself. But this time I can choose how that happens. So I can build myself up in the way that I want to. And so
sort of like designing your life, right? Like designing a
pretty,
video game. It's sort of like,
pretty
yeah,
much, yeah,
I'm
like
going to
how do I want
decide.
this to go? Like, do I want this here or here? Like,
I
and then
love that.
I could choose who I am. And that was really because I felt like I didn't have anything.
Right.
I didn't have to lose anything, so I might as well try it.
You had an opportunity to start over again.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Through all this hardship, it became something that was a positive. I mean, all that stuff was still negative, and it happened, and it was horrible. But there was something else that happened afterwards, which was I could choose how I wanted to be from that point on. And with psychological therapy and with you too, I made the choice of like, I want to be somebody. And I'm going to try not to be emotional here, but it's like,
No, it's
it's hard.
okay. Be you.
Um,
Take your time.
I want to be somebody who doesn't hold back. I want to be able to do the things that I want to do, even if it's hard. And that's the choice that I made. And so throughout 2013 and 2014, that's pretty much what I did. It took like 2 years before I was like, okay, I feel like I'm starting to get a handle on it now. It took that long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It took a long time for you to get to that place. So I think two
Totally.
years is actually, good time
Sure, yeah.
considering, right?
Yeah, totally.
Were you like in your late 20s at that point? Mid 20s?
I was in my mid 20s, probably 24
Yeah.
at that point, maybe 25
Yeah.
closer.
Yeah.
So still like pretty young in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. But still a lot of baggage to deal with,
Still a lot of baggage,
Yeah.
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 So 2015 is kind of the year where everything changed for me. I was still working at the same job, but I was starting to get a confidence that I never ever had before. And so I was starting to like think like, okay, what do I want to do? And of course my mind went to video games. I was thinking about all these different things I could do, but there are things that I want to do and like it doesn't really stick. Like it's not something that I always want to do. It's just something that's a short term like hobby that's fun, but I don't want it to be like my job, right?
And just
So,
explain a little bit because I remember this from our sessions together.
right.
How did you come to video games? What role was video games playing in your life at that point, or up until then?
Video games were a constant for me. Ever since I was a kid, I had video games around me since probably I was like 5 or 6.
Wow.
Um, and it was always something that was it was always something that meant a lot to me
Yeah.
because in a game you can be whoever you want to be.
Mm.
You don't have to have your issues in those games. If you want to be like a space marine who like shoots aliens all the time and you feel super cool, you can do that. If you want to be like I don't know, like anything, probably a game for that, and
The
you
sky's
can.
the limit.
The sky is the limit. Imagination is really,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was really helpful for me when I was feeling emotional or feeling down, or when I didn't want to talk to people. I had games, and games told stories and showed characters, and I could do things that were super cool, and I felt great when
Mm.
playing games, and it was always there.
Yeah. In a way,
Uh,
I feel like maybe the video games were a form of therapy for you,
oh, totally,
right?
totally. I remember when my cat died at the end of 2012. I couldn't, for a short time, I couldn't play a game that had violence in it or killing in it
Mm.
because of the death association that I had just gone through. So there was a game called Flower that I played, and you play as a flower that's like floating in the wind, and you gather like other flowers, and it's very calming, and the visuals are very soothing. And
Mm.
I played that, and it was an escape
Yeah.
for me. It was something that I could do where I didn't have to think about death. I didn't have to think about um, any of the issues that I'm having. I could just be in this grassy like landscape
Yeah.
and just be calm and just like fly around and just relax.
Yeah. It
And
sounds to me
that
like a
helped me.
form of meditation.
In some ways, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
So games have always been around for me. They've always been important. The stories that they can tell are something that you can't tell in a movie or a book because you are the main character. You choose like how the story happens,
Hmm.
um, and you really have a deep connection with that character because it's you.
Yeah.
And so I've always enjoyed that, and I've always played games in my spare time. And so, trying to find a job, like what am I going to do with my life? Like what do I like? And after sort of going through different options, I realized, well, I play games a lot. That's sort of that's my thing. I always have. Uh, why not try to do something with that?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'll see what I can do. And I remember looking at there's a college called Interdeck here, in Montreal, and I remember looking at it in like January of 2015, and they sometimes they had like open houses almost, in which you could go into a classroom and like see like what it was like, and like talk to the teachers and talk to the staff. And I thought that seems interesting. So maybe like the next time that it happens, I will go to it. And I made like a point of like, this will happen. Like, if I see this happening, I have to go to it. Thinking, like, you know, like, in like a few months or something, it might happen. No pressure, no rush, whatever.
And just to be clear, at this point, I think that you weren't in speech therapy anymore, right?
I think I may have been, or
Okay.
like it was like the tail end.
Okay.
It was like coming up on the end.
Okay. And were you still, did you still have psychological therapy going on at that time?
I think I ended for this session at the end of 2014.
Okay.
That was when I ended. I still have psychological therapy now. I've like started it back up.
I always say that, you know, getting psychological help is a sign of good mental health, you know, is a sign of a healthy person, because everybody needs it at some, you know, I'm not saying everybody needs it every week for their entire life, but everybody needs it sometimes throughout their life.
Yeah, exactly. Because like thinking about it, like all the different events that happen to us throughout like high school and like adult years and stuff like that, to think that you can just handle everything, like that's completely wrong actually.
Yeah.
Like everybody needs help at some point, even as you said, like even if it's not constantly, you know, we need some help at some points.
Sometimes it's just too much to handle alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's completely okay. And I wish that it was more accepted.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, you know, if you make an analogy to physical health, like imagine if, you know, like when I was 40, I broke my arm, and when I was 45, I broke my foot. And before that I had never broken anything before, and now I'm 50 and I'm being very careful because I don't want this to continue to be a pattern. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've got to make it till July without breaking anything. You know, but imagine if I had fallen on the ice and broken my arm and just said, you know what? I'm just going to suck it up. I mean, it really hurts, and I'm pretty sure it's broken, and my arm is like exploding like a balloon, but I'll be okay, you know, and just go to work the next day in pain and just take time. Like, imagine that's nobody would do that. I mean, okay, there are some people who are very stoic and not don't
some people
don't take care of themselves, but
like, I'm gonna just walk it off.
Yeah, like the real macho men, you know. But like imagine, you know, so of course I went to the hospital, and I got an x-ray, and I had it set in a cast, and then I had physiotherapy afterwards, and you know, and got healthy again, and it was a process. And so why should this be any different, you know? But it's because it's invisible. It's that part of the iceberg that's under the water, and it's not obvious, it's not tangible. We don't see it, people don't see it, but we feel it, and it's real, and it permeates every aspect of our life. So of course it's okay to get help, and it's necessary to get help in that area.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah.
So, where was I?
So,
Yes, 2015 open house, and I was like, okay, I will do it, like whenever it happens again. Thinking, okay, it's gonna be like a few months in the future.
mm-hmm.
So 2 weeks later, it happens, and I'm like, well, shoot, I
Uh-oh.
said that I would do it, and I'm scared now, but I said that I would do it, so I guess I'll do it. So I did. I went and I sat in like a class and I talked to the teachers. I talked to the like head of something something, and I was like, yeah, okay, this seems all right. This seems cool. I feel like I could learn a lot. Um, so I decided to apply for the September class because they had like another one coming up. But like it was like too soon, and I was like, that's probably gonna be too stressful. I'm gonna go for the next one. So I applied for it, and like I didn't complete high school, and as it turns out, like you need to complete high school in order to go to college.
Wow.
Generally speaking. Um,
Although
so I
sometimes, if a certain amount of time has elapsed, I thought that, they make allowances for that, but okay.
it's possible, yeah, yeah.
Maybe
For
that's
my
just in
case,
university. I know in university you can enroll as a mature student, but
okay,
for
okay,
college it
yeah.
might be different.
Yeah, yeah. So they got back to me and said like, hey, like we noticed that you don't have like you're like high school or something, but like I had written a cover header too, and I sort of explained like my love for video games, and not just that, but like how I was like interested in how games were made ever since like years ago, and I when I came to Montreal, I was at Ubisoft actually for a short time, helping them out for played testing, which is when they get like outside like people to uh, play an early version of a game and provide feedback. So I mentioned that I had done that, and so they said like, we noticed that you didn't complete high school. Usually, we don't like accept people who haven't completed high school, but we saw like this other stuff, and so if you want to apply again and just like add as much info in terms of like things that you have paid in the past. It doesn't have to be for just like video game stuff. Just like include as much creative info as you can. Then we can take a look again. And so I did, and they accepted me.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous that happened.
Fabulous.
Great. It's fantastic. So I went to school for, video game design and scripting and all that fun stuff. I
All that
learned a
fun stuff
lot.
that I'll never understand.
there's some there's some stuff that's pretty complicated there. Scripting specifically is like some people in my class just could not understand how like the functions like worked, and I was over there like, okay, this connects to this, and then like I need to do this, and I felt like I really like understood it.
Amazing.
Um,
And you know what? I just want to ask you, what was it
yeah,
like in school, right? Because I sort of remember you kind of talking about how you were hiding in your apartment, and let's say if you had to
right.
give your rent, to your landlord, you wanted to try to just maybe slip it under her door so you wouldn't have to talk with her, and right, like,
Right.
which is not just you. That's a lot of people who stutter,
Right.
right? You'd rather
Hmm.
avoid those kind of uncomfortable speaking situations, and
Yeah.
and I remember you saying, oh, yes, I could apply online, or I could look at the different programs online, but eventually I'm going to have to pick up the phone and speak to a person, or go in there and speak to a person, and I can't do that. So
Right.
now you've gone from this life where you could, you were the dishwasher, and although you were still being, you're still washing dishes through school, which is
Yeah.
also amazing, that you did both at the
It
same
was a lot
time.
of work. A lot of
That
work.
must have been exhausting. Yeah,
Yep.
nonstop. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine. And then you, where was I going with that? Yes, so you went from this life where you really could hide a lot of the time and not speak most of the time, and then now you're in school and you're telling me you're explaining, different concepts to your classmates, and I imagine maybe you had to do presentations, ask and answer questions in class. So I know that my people who stutter are going to want to know, like, how did you do that?
Yeah. Um, so at that point, I was starting to be more confident in myself and accepting. Like it was still early days, but it was starting to accept that I am going to stutter, and this is who I am, and that was a big thing of like accepting this is who I am,
Hmm.
because up until that point, I didn't want to be somebody who stuttered. I never wanted to show it. I didn't want anybody to know about it. I was hiding it. And at school was the first time where I told somebody that I am somebody who stutters, and I like just like advertised. That's what it's called.
Yes.
I advertised it, and it was like that doesn't always help everybody, but for me it was a sense of I control this now.
Yes.
Sometimes it still strikes me, and it sort of it grabs me, but if I tell people that I stutter, for me at least, it's not as threatening, it's not as scary, it's not as hurtful when I do it, because people sort of know that there's something going on, and it's called stuttering, and even if they don't completely understand the whole aspect of it because they can't,
Yeah.
at least knowing that they know that I stutter makes it easier to stutter. It
Yeah.
almost it makes it okay to stutter, and that was a big thing for me. Um, Now I also had like you know I listened to music too that really motivated me. That helped me a lot at that point, because there was a
Hmm.
lot of emotions happening, and I was still like I was more confident, but I was still like not all the way there. So music like supporting me was a big thing too.
Mm.
That helped a lot. Um, And then I found that speaking in front of everyone else was scary, but I was actually pretty good at it, which is really weird. But I think it's because when I speak in front of people, I can sort of like ham it up a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I can be like, "Hey, everybody, how's it going? Here's my thing," and I can sort of be more animated almost.
Yeah.
And for me, that helps me to not stutter as much. And
Right.
obviously, I can't always do that in my life. Like, hey, I would like to order a ham sandwich. I can't always do that.
No,
That's
not
that's
always.
outrageous. But
I remember you telling me, I think, that when you did impersonations or accents, that you
yes,
wouldn't stutter, right? So it's sort
yes,
of along those
I believe that
lines.
this is true. If I do a voice of some kind, I very rarely stutter unless I particularly choose to do as such. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very odd how
Yeah.
this works, and everybody has to find techniques that work for them. But for me, like being more animated and more, I guess, just more like boisterous.
Yeah.
It actually helps me.
Okay.
So I was always scared doing a speech in front of the class, like showing off something that I did. Always just frightening
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
But
You and 90% of the population, or
right,
maybe
exactly.
98%. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
like
they say that at a funeral, most people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. That's how
you know what? I totally get it.
fear of
I
public
totally,
speaking is real, and it's not just
absolutely.
for people who stutter, but all the more so, for
All the
people.
more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, like I presented in front of the class a good like 5 or 6 times throughout that year.
Yeah.
And I think maybe like thinking back too, um, having to go through an experience in which like in school, like when the teacher like she like eased me into it over time, I think that really helped for this
Mm.
because I was able to do it back then, and being able to do something, even if it's hard, you can look back on it and say like, well, that other time it was hard and I did it. So if it happened, then it could probably happen again.
Yeah.
So that probably really helped me in terms of the public speaking stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
And
point.
I ended up being like, yeah, I think, a pretty good like public speaker. And there were other people in the class who didn't stutter, who I think were not as good as me.
Yeah.
Uh,
I have no
so
doubt. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so that was definitely hard, but it was an example of like I had a positive experience in the past, and also I was starting to become more confident, and I was advertising my stutter more, and that allowed me to feel more control
Yeah.
over it. And
Yeah.
so it was like a confluence of um, a few things that happened, and it sort of crystallized into this like, well, I can sort of speak publicly, and I can sort of do it well.
Nice.
And so that's yeah, it was a really cool experience.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight that point that you can stutter, and you can even stutter a lot. and
Yeah.
still be an excellent communicator and a great public speaker.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 I still feel like I can be like a better um public speaker, and I can communicate far better than like a lot of other people. I
Yeah.
think because
Yeah.
I think because I know how hard it can be, and I know how to like or like boil it down into just the specifics so that I don't have to talk as much.
Mm-hmm.
But also that helps with how clear my communication is too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you're concise. You get right to the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah. And that's because like, I have learned to speak as concisely and as quickly, or not quickly, but as specifically as I can so that I don't have to say as much.
Right. With as few
So
words as possible.
exactly. So
Yeah.
stuttering, I think, in that way is like helped me.
Yeah. Yeah. I could definitely, that's another topic that we could broach one day is,
Yeah.
how stuttering has made you a better person, a stronger person, and maybe even, a better candidate, in terms of when
Mm,
you're applying for jobs,
yeah. That's a
yeah.
whole other topic that I would
Yes.
love to talk about.
Yeah.
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 Totally.
Yeah, so maybe we're gonna wrap up now, even though I think we could probably speak for a few more hours, but I don't think
Totally.
anybody will.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody will appreciate that. We'll have to do it in segments.
Yeah, totally.
So do you have a message that you'd like to share with people who stutter? Just some kind of a general message for them.
For the people who stutter, for the thing that I would want to hear that I didn't hear at all growing up is that your voice is worth hearing, and the thoughts that you have are worth hearing, even if it's hard to get that out. And it is hard, but your opinions, they matter just as much as anybody else's. And you should absolutely, if you can, speak. And there are times where it's going to be hard. There are times where you just can't do it. And I still have that even in the current job. There are times where I want to speak and I want to say something, and I just can't.
Yeah.
And that's okay because I can communicate through like a text or an email or something, and that's how I have to communicate. And other people have other issues that they have to deal with that we might not see, but this is what we have. And it's okay to have bad days. It's not that you are bad. It's not that your voice is not valid, because it is. It's hard, but you should be heard. People should listen to what you have to say, because you are valid.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm getting all choked up.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. And do you have a message that you'd like to share with people who have the opportunity to interact with people who stutter, or even, not necessarily like, yes, strangers, but even their parents, their spouses, their children, people, their friends, what would you
Yeah.
like to say to them?
Allow the stutterer to take their time and speak in the way that they want to. I know that it might be hard to have to sit there when somebody is like stuck on a word. It might feel awkward, but it's if somebody is stuttering, they are still speaking, and you shouldn't interrupt them. You shouldn't try to help them. They know what they want to say. So allow them to say it and just give them the time, give them the space to speak. And we need some more time and a bigger space in order to speak, but we can still speak. So just allow that person to talk.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
I need to take a breath and gather myself. Whew.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. And we've only scratched the surface today.
Just a tiny bit. There's so
Yeah.
much more that we
Yeah.
can talk about.
Yeah, but I think we did a pretty good job.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story with us. And I think that so many people will benefit from knowing about your journey with stuttering. I'd love to continue this conversation with you in the future, to provide people with more knowledge, guidance, and inspiration. And, if you're willing to do that, then I would love to continue the conversation with you.
Absolutely, I would.
All right.
Absolutely.
And actually, there are two messages that I would like to leave you with if you are
Sure.
a person out there who stutters, and you too. Know that you're not alone. There are support groups out there for people who stutter. There's always psychological help if that's something that you need, because speech therapists, although we do counseling, that is really outside of our scope of practice, and sometimes there's just a lot of emotional baggage and emotions to deal with. So it's okay, as you heard Chris saying in today's interview, it's okay to need help and not to be able to do it on your own. And there are speech therapists out there who can help you to overcome your stuttering, not to cure your stuttering, and there are no guarantees, but to live a good life as a person who stutters. And the second thing that I'd like to leave you with is that you should know that it's okay to stutter. It's okay to stutter, and I just think that speaks for itself. And I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time. So thanks so much. Bye.
See you later, everybody.